Duke, there's no video, mate. Duke, you there?
I really love that video.
Yeah, that video wasn't showing.
Oh, fuck, man. Okay, so... oh, God. Okay. Let's see how we do it. And why is everything repeating? Okay.
What's going on?
I'm just trying to work out how to do this. Okay, so we're broadcasting. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hello?
Okay.
Duke, are you there?
Yeah. Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, something's going wrong here. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you need to turn your YouTube off. You've got a YouTube tab open. I can hear myself.
Okay. All right. Hang on. Wait 1 second. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, the YouTube tab is gone. I don't know what happened to that video, but there we go. Hello?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know what happened with that video, but I was just getting echoes and all sorts of other nonsense going on. So I'll try and do that video separately on my channel. But anyway, how are you going there, Surgeon?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
You're more than welcome. I hope we get another couple of guys on at least. What I would like to speak about tonight is, or this afternoon, I should say, is can we, as British nationalists, save Britain by stopping mass immigration, which is what we basically need to do to save Britain?
Well, I kind of have a dismal view of it, and I think it's probably unlikely. But I know that you have other ideas, so I suppose we can talk about that. Get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. Okay. Look, all of the nationalists I like, who are mostly British, Canadian, Australian, some Americans. Don't know many New Zealand nationalists, but most of the ones I know are fairly black-pilled, as I know you are. I happen to think that we could perhaps, if we really exert ourselves, stop mass immigration in the same way that we actually got the Brexit that we voted for, by making the Conservative Party adopt it, because they fear losing the votes that they won't get if they don't support it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's a tried and tested policy. Technically, it did work. It just took 30 years to achieve, with a man who is basically the most charismatic leader in UK politics for maybe 2 or 3 generations. So if you can replicate all of those conditions and do it in half the time span, then we may get somewhere. But I would say based on past trends, it looks quite unlikely.
Well, okay. I will say that Nigel Farage was not the most charismatic man in British politics for 2 generations. He probably was for 10 years, but not for 2 generations. And Nigel Farage is also making very good noises at the moment, mainly about illegal immigration, but that's a good way to stick your toe in and test the waters, I think. And his party, the Brexit Party, which has got an outdated logo, it's got an outdated idea, no one's promoting it. It actually has gone up to over 4% of the public vote recently.
Yes. I mean, I don't expect the Brexit Party to continue in its current form. I suspect if Farage is going to make any other party, as he has hinted, then it will be in the guise of the Reform Party.
Yeah.
But, we just, at this point in time, we don't know. And I suspect that we probably won't know for another 2 years, because if we've got, 5 years between the next election, then there's obviously there's an element of timing in terms of when he should think about starting that party up. And as we've seen with the Brexit Party, he's very capable of getting something off the ground very quickly with backing. So he could get something up and running rather quickly. But you would think that he would want some sort of lead up time coming into the next general election. So that's why I say, maybe halfway through this term, he might start the beginnings of forming a party. But I don't really quite know. And of course, it's the question is up in the air as to what this party is even standing for.
Yeah,
no, and whether even mass migration will even be on the agenda.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that. I think if Farage is going to start a party, it'll be probably 18 months or like you say, 2 years' time. I think Farage would be kind of like a British version of Trump, but more intelligent, because I think Farage is more intelligent than Trump. And we will have to see. The one thing I think he might do is, as UKIP and then the Brexit Party did with Brexit, is to force the Conservatives to adopt the policies that we want them to adopt, i.e., in this particular case, stopping mass immigration.
Yeah, but I think the takeaway that I've taken from Brexit is that what happens with the Conservative Party is that if there is a threat to their voter base, they will adopt the policies of the opposing party. And then once the opposing party has been destroyed, they revert back to being exactly how they were before. So my view is that the Conservative Party has to be killed outright. So that means absolutely no cucking ever again to the Tories. If I could have my way again with the Brexit Party, I would not have stood any of those MPs down whatsoever. Not a single one.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I would also say that we don't really know what the Conservative Party has yet done with Brexit. We've got to see what comes out of this. And of course, it's been subsumed in this huge nonsense about the China virus and the lockdown and this complete con job that we have had over that. So we have to wait to see what sort of Brexit we actually get. It could be okay. It could be totally crap. We don't know. The only thing we do know is that UKIP originally forced the Conservatives to adopt Brexit. It wouldn't have happened without them.
Well, I mean, UKIP certainly forced the Tories into the referendum. Absolutely. Yeah. There's absolutely no way we would have had a referendum without UKIP.
100%.
But I think it's sort of it's an open question as to whether the Brexit Party had any influence on the Conservatives post the referendum. I'm not quite sure about that. I think that, obviously the Brexit Party just simply represented a threat to the Tories at the recent election. But, once the Tories have won the election like they have done with a massive majority, well, they can do whatever they want. And basically the Brexit Party is done and dusted. And they've got 5 years to sweep that under the rug and let the sort of tensions cease and sort of go away. So that's why I've got the view that you can't. This idea of forcing the Tories into doing something is pointless. At this point, you have to just have the view of we need to destroy the Tories completely.
Look, I don't disagree with you that we have to destroy the Tories. I mean, the Conservatives don't actually conserve anything. They go left at the speed limit. I totally agree with that. But then you have to look at someone like Nigel Farage, who today, even though he's only going on about the illegal immigration across the English Channel, is actually representing far more British people than Boris Johnson is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that immigration's been at the top of the agenda of many people for many years now.
Brexit was basically because of mass immigration.
Absolutely.
It was the basis of Brexit.
Yeah.
And I just feel that Nigel Farage, look, I know people say he's a globalist and they say this, that, and the other, as many people do. But I also think he's a politician, and politicians come out with lies and crap for the most part. But I do think that he could force the Conservative. I don't think he can form a government, but I think he could force the Conservative Party in UK to go more right wing and just to say, okay, we're going to stop mass third world immigration into Britain.
I mean, possibly, but it seems to me that if you actually really want to stop this, and I mean permanently, then you have to have absolute consensus across the board. It can't just be the Tories who are going to stop migration and Labour won't, or the Lib Dems won't. If you want to have a continuation of no migration in sort of perpetual terms, then all parties, left and right, have to agree with that as well. So it's simply not good enough that the Tories would have that position, even if they adopted it, which I think is quite slim. But
do you think there's any chance whatever that Labour would adopt that?
No.
Any chance
really.
at all?
No,
okay.
Not really. But I think that if you actually want genuine lasting change, then across the whole political spectrum, there has to be an agreement that at some point there can be no more migration.
Well, look, I'd agree with you in a perfect world, but I just can't believe that the socialists in the Labour Party would ever agree with that, or the Lib Dems, or the Greens. Those guys are all just Marxists, basically, and they will never agree to that.
Yeah.
So we have to support a party which is not Marxist that will do that.
That's right, but and then of course the question is, well, what is that party?
Well, listen, I have always said for a long time now that the Conservatives have not been a real right-wing party for many, many years, going back certainly to the Second World War, probably maybe even before that, but certainly to the 1950s. But if we can get a party that says, okay, we are going to stop mass third world immigration into the UK, any British nationalist that didn't support that would be insane.
But I mean, in many ways, we already had those parties. We've got For Britain, Britain First. I mean, obviously with Britain First, they were struck off the Electoral Commission in 2017, so they can't stand any candidates. But it's not like there aren't parties out there that have that position.
Yeah, but they're not mainstream parties that most of Joe blogs are going to vote for, are they?
That is true, yeah.
I mean, look, I quite like For Britain. I quite like Britain First. I used to quite like the Veterans Party. There are, I think, I don't know, probably more than half a dozen British national parties who all spend more time arguing with each other than they do anything else. But we have to get in the system we have at the moment, which is a crap system, two-party system, or if you vote Tory, you're not really getting anything right-wing. In the system we have at the moment, you have to force the Conservative Party to adopt the nationalist point of view.
Yeah, in which case, I come back to my initial point. What is the vehicle for that? What do you think the vehicle is for that?
Well, I just think it's the same as UKIP forced the Tories to adopt Brexit. They did it by saying if you don't support Brexit, you ain't going to win the next election.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. But you just said that no one's going to vote for Britain or Britain First. So
I listen. I wish they would, but I don't think they will. So what I think is the best thing we can do is to have a party, maybe led by Farage. I can't see anyone better anyway, that would force the Conservatives to say, look, we are no longer going to have mass third world immigration into the UK. And to me, that is the vital first step. If we can do that, then there is a slim chance that we can save our nation. If we don't, we're lost.
yes, although I would say that even now, based on the figures that I've seen, that it's not even good enough just simply to stop migration.
No. Let me make myself clear. I know that if we leave everything as it is now, the new immigrants will probably outbreed the indigenous British people. But if we can stop mass immigration now, then we can do other things. We can then say, okay, if you commit a serious crime, after your prison sentence, you will be repatriated to wherever the hell you came from. We can also say that if you're an illegal immigrant, off you go, mate, back to where you came from. And that will gradually change things a bit. Maybe not enough, but it will start to change things.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess you're more optimistic than I am. I just see that.
Well, if you're not as optimistic as me, and I'm fairly black-pilled about these things, then you might as well give up and say, okay, UK's gone, and I'm never going to do that, not as long as I breathe.
Yeah, but again, I mean, there's a difference between just sort of observing what the facts are, what the trends are, and then having sort of like a blind optimism. I mean, I'm just simply trying to be a realist, but that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in putting my energies into a solution if there is one.
But I'm not blindly optimistic. What I'm saying is, let's stop mass third world immigration into UK, then say, okay, you commit a serious crime, off you go back to your country of origin. Thirdly, if you're an illegal immigrant, back you go off to your country of origin. And then beyond that, I would say the one area I do agree with PA, or I'm not big supporters of, because of their Nazi LARPing bullshit. The one thing I would say I agree with PA is, okay, we will then give like 20 grand or whatever it is for someone to return to their country of first and second generation immigrants. I can't see that we can do much more than that.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, certainly, I mean, you have to set viable targets So, I mean, from sort of like the PA perspective, I mean, why even talk about what? I don't understand why even talk about repatriation when we can't even get limiting migration on the table. I mean, that seems like the most obvious thing is just actually let's just stop the migration first and see if we can even achieve that goal before we even think about repatriating people, unless there is validity in having a certain section of the a certain section of the opposition who have a very extreme position in order to force the Overton window further to the right. I don't know, but I mean, I certainly agree with the logic that you're putting forward.
Yeah, no, I mean that's my real point. Is that if you want to save Britain, we have to stop mass third-world immigration. If we don't, and if we don't do it in the next 10, 12, maybe 15 years, UK's finished. It's done. We don't have that long to save this thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're in agreement on that, certainly.
I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know how clear you need to make it to people. And what annoys me about PA is that most of the supporters of PA are good, patriotic Brits, but they're being led up the garden path by idiot Nazi larpers like Mark Collette.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've made my opinions on this quite clear, in the sense that I mean, I think that the problem that they've got is because of the things they talk about and because of who leads it, the people who are activists cannot really afford to show their faces in public. And therefore, if you don't have the ability to have an in real life presence, then all you have is an online presence. And without that online presence, they are nothing. And it really is only just a matter of time before, one by one, they get nuked from their social media platforms, or people start getting doxxed either through infighting or by hope not hate when they go to these conferences and hikes. So it just strikes me that they've kind of painted themselves into a corner, in the sense that because they've got such a sort of rotten reputation simply by virtue of having Mark Collette at the head of it, and because they talk about Jews all the time, and there's these sort of very overt references to certain books and all this kind of stuff that really has its roots in sort of Third Reich fetishism.
Imagine an Englishman with Shakespeare, Dickens, and all these other people naming the top 3 books he would save, and not one of them was by a Brit. That's just insane. Like, Britain has one of the best literary records of the whole wide world. We have so many great authors, and Mark Collette said his number 1 book he would save in the whole wide world was Mein Kampf.
Yeah, well, I mean, I personally don't want to spend any more time sort of attacking PA. I mean, I've already made my views known, and I'd be very interested to get your opinion on why you think why is it that the fringe right in the UK is drawn towards essentially the Third Reich and all of the topics that are surrounded by that. What would you think about that?
Because they don't understand British history. I think that 90% of British people, because of our very, very poor education system these days, have no idea of what British history was. I remember growing up in the 1960s and 70s, and I learned nothing at school, basically, but stuff I read myself. My old dad, my old man, got me into reading ancient Roman history, and from there I got into reading British history. And I was reading stuff about the Anglo-Sikh Wars in the 1840s the Peninsular War in the Napoleonic Wars, obviously battles like Trafalgar with the Royal Navy. And I don't think most British people have the least idea of the things that British people have done. Ordinary, average, working class British people, middle class British people, and even some aristocrats. I don't think they have any idea of the things that Britain has done. You know, we didn't become the greatest empire the world has ever seen because we were ordinary guys. We were not.
Yeah, but no, but what is it? So just imagine that these people sort of exist in a vacuum and they don't really have an understanding of British history. Well, how is it that when they come online, that they get sucked into this sort of Third Reich Jewish narrative that pervades throughout the fringe right? Why is it that they're not sucked into a sort of pro-British narrative of history? Can you explain that?
Okay, first of all, there is no pro-British narrative. Where would you find that? I mean, outside of the guys that you and I know, where is there a pro-British narrative? I don't think it's anywhere. I mean, in terms of British education, it's totally Marxist these days. Cultural Marxist, certainly. So where would you find that? How could you become pro-British in terms of an education? You just won't, because it's not there. But there is this huge, I won't say huge, there is this counter-culture kind of, Hitler was a great guy thing, but it's totally anti-British.
Yeah, and that's I mean, I think that certainly needs to change. But and also one of the things that I've one of my bugbears is that you know, the fringe right ideas are sort of inextricably linked with the Third Reich and a Jewish question. And I think, you know, if you actually want a thriving fringe right, far right, that's actually going to be able to be used by the mainstream conservative establishment to sort of draw energy from, then you have to drop all of this baggage, because they just won't touch it, and they won't allow anybody in those circles to mingle with them as it currently is.
All right, look, I would say this. I mean, people should look at, there's a very good website called The Affirmative Right that Colin Liddell runs. Now, Colin Liddell is a Scots guy who I think lives in Japan these days, but he was one of the original alt-right guys in 2015 and 2014, long before tiki torches and all this nonsense that some of the American guys did. And I think that's worth looking at. And he points out that, you know, the original alt-right was not this basically neo-Nazi, Nazi-laughing bollocks, basically.
Mm-hmm. So his contention is that it's essentially been co-opted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if you look at people like Andrew Anglin, and you look at people like, who's that guy with the Jewish wife who's actually probably Jewish himself, who's basically a self-hating Jew. And they push all this stuff on to us goyim, and we're supposed to just say, yeah, okay, cool, it's all great, you know what I mean? And it's nonsense. It really isn't true. If you believe that the super Jews can control us all, then I think what you're saying is that white Western people are far less powerful than we really are. And someone God's own prototype in the chat has just said Mike Enoch. Yeah, absolutely. Mike Enoch, if he's not a Jew, I'd be amazed, frankly. But yeah, fine. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. I mean, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But I mean, it seems completely irrelevant to me because I'm not. I don't see why we should be sort of leveraging people from the US anyway, particularly when they effectively hate. I mean, they hate us. They hate
Well,
Anglos. I see this online all the time. We're the root cause for all of the ills in the West, and like Culture Thug said, we deserve to be overrun by Muslims for what we've done in the world. We've always been on the wrong side of every single war, and I just think, why are any of our people talking to these individuals?
I don't think for 1 minute that most Americans hate most Brits. I think there are quite a lot of alt-right Americans who do, but alt-right Americans tend to be neo-Nazi larpers. But I don't think average American nationalists, people like the distributists, for example, not anti-British at all. I think there was a certain amount of anti-Britishism going on in the US in the Second World War, for sure, because you got to remember in the Second World War, the British Empire was the big counter to the American Empire, which it no longer is in many ways, sadly. But that was the case then. But I don't think most average American nationalists are anti-British. I think it's an alt-right neo-Nazi con job.
Yeah, but I mean, I get the impression that the further, so if you view it as a spectrum, so you've got the far right, and then you sort of go to the center right, and the further you get from the far right, the less anti-Anglo and Anglo-Celtic it becomes. But of course, the trade-off is that the further you drift towards the center right, the less hardcore they get, the less ethnocentric they get. So they're going to be more predisposed to a kind of, I hate to use the word because it's being thrown around as a slur word these days, but civic nationalist. So there is that, and that's why I'm sort of very big on the idea that it's very important to disentangle the far right and the fringe right, and these are liberal ideas from the dominance of the Third Reich and the Jewish question. So I view that as being my mission. And that's everything that I do is geared towards trying to extricate the fringe right from that narrative. That's what I view my goal as being, and I'm trying to foster conversations in that respect.
Okay. I'm just looking at the chat, and I'd say Anglus Patria's comment is not totally wrong, although you'd have to go into why that happened. But okay. Look, I don't disagree with much of what you say. I just think we need to look at the battles we have to fight, and I think maybe the battle you're looking at fighting isn't directly affecting the one that we need to win. But I may be wrong. That's just
well. I'm not sure how you can win this fight without creating widespread acceptance of illiberal ideas. I don't see how you can possibly get people to be on board with.
I'm not a supporter of many liberal ideas. I'm really not.
I'm sorry. I'm not saying that you are, but if you want the general public and there to be a general consensus that there should be less migration and there should be restrictions on LGBT and all this kind of stuff, people have to be more.
Which most people I think want. Yeah, but most people support that. Most ordinary people would support that. Yeah, but I think the vast majority would.
But the problem, you're right. The problem is not the people, though. It is the people who wield power. So
absolutely, I agree.
This is why I'm waiting for somebody to give me an example of a grassroots movement that actually achieved something without the help of powerful people.
Brexit.
But that had powerful people involved in it.
Yes, it did. I agree. But if we got powerful people to support Brexit, can we not get powerful people to support ending mass immigration?
I think so. I mean, there are certainly going to be people out there who are going to support that position, but it's just a question of what are the conditions required in order to achieve that. And I just feel like the current establishment has built up such a powerful infrastructure, and the system is so calcified that it's very hard for people. I mean, for instance, I think we know that there are people in the Conservative Party who are a lot more hardcore than they let on, but they're kind of impotent. They can't really act because the party will sort of dispose of them. So the question is how do we break open the narrative and make it a fertile environment for people to be able to express those views. And I think we need somebody with a lot of money who doesn't give a shit what public opinion is, and they're going to really go for it. I think that's what we need. We need some sort of, to get things rolling, we need some kind of maverick billionaire to get behind it. But no one's prepared to put their head above the parapet.
I think you're wrong, Sojourner, about public opinion. I think average British public opinion is totally against mass third world immigration.
I agree with that. I mean, we've got we have these statistics on it. We know that the average Labour voter, that the average Labour voter is
socially conservative.
The average Labour voter is to the right of the average Tory MP.
Absolutely right.
The average Conservative voter is to the right of all of them.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So we know that.
Right. So it's not about public opinion. No. Unless you go on about public opinion in the sense of Twitter or The Guardian or some other left-wing bullshit. Average British people want mass immigration stopped, and they have for the last 50 years. That is one thing that PA get totally right. Most British people have always wanted mass third world immigration to stop.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but I'm simply saying that what the public want is irrelevant.
Well, it's irrelevant because the public don't make enough noise about it. It was like Brexit was irrelevant. Brexit was irrelevant until enough of the public made a fuss about it.
Yeah, but again, I'm not really sure that the public really made a fuss about Brexit. It was, so you've got, the way I look at it is that you've got the people on the ground, you've got the grassroots, and there's a groundswell of opinion, but you need a talisman to lead them and to actually get on TV and to form a party and to organize and to get things up and running and rolling. That is that's the natural state of order. You have followers and you have leaders, and you have far more followers than you have leaders. I
don't disagree with that. That's why I said perhaps somebody like Farage could act as the catalyst for this.
Yeah, and in my view, he is really the only person who can actually, he's got a track record of it. We know that he will get on TV. He's a great speaker. He can answer questions very well. He's likable. He's shrewd. He knows how to talk to the media. He knows how to not get into a bit of hot and bother about the things he talks about. So we know that he is, he's got that X factor. He's got the talisman quality to get something up and going. The question is has he got the balls? Has he got the steel? Has he got the backbone to go back to the question of migration? And I think there's a big question mark over that.
I don't know. I think if you watch Farage over the last 4 or 5 months, I think he's signaling pretty heavily that he wants to get involved in that discussion. I mean, okay, he's going on about illegal immigrants, whereas legal immigrants is the main story. But I think Farage is the only one brave enough to actually say, hang on, guys, Why are we letting all these bastards come into our country?
Well, I've heard this criticism already. So I've heard people say that Farage talking about the illegal immigrants. This is just a safety valve and like controlled opposition play to.
That sounds like a PA story.
Yeah, it came from the periphery of PA, and basically the way I look at it is that that's very cynical, and it, maybe it's true, but also there are media cycles, and you have to kind of you have to go with the ebb and flow of the news cycle. So mass migration is not in the papers, it's not on the news, but what is in the news at the minute is the fact that there are dinghies coming across the channel to Dover
many times a day,
every single day. And so what are we meant to do? Ignore that? You have to roll with the punch. You have to roll with the punches and work with the material that you've got at the time. So my view is that yes, it would be nice if he was talking about mass migration, but at the same time, there are these dinghies coming across, and it seems stupid not to talk about it. Someone has to talk about it, and I'm glad that it's Farage.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's testing the waters to some degree. I can see him rebranding the Brexit Party. And I didn't like the Brexit Party. I thought it was too globalist. But I can see Farage rebranding the Brexit Party. I like people like Katie Hopkins, etc., who are actually talking about what's happening. No one else is. At least they're talking about it.
Well, that is, I mean, it's a sad state of affairs that the only people talking about this is Katie Hopkins, who I find to be an absolutely despicable individual. I personally cannot stand that woman. She's crass and disgusting, and I think actually that's an indictment of just how thin the bench is in terms of talent.
Why do you hate her so much?
Because she's just a repugnant woman. I mean, maybe this is just my middle class sensibilities coming through. But the way she talks, she's so crass, and she could do what she did without being so vulgar, in my view.
Wow. Okay, I don't agree with that at all. But okay. To me, Kay Hopkins expresses probably a lot of what average Brits think, to be honest. I mean, I certainly don't think that's repugnant. I just think it's the way average Brits think.
Yeah, but she's not a smooth operator in the way that Farage is.
No, she's not. She's nowhere near as sophisticated as Nigel Farage. But I'm not a great Nigel Farage fan either. I'll support him so long as he's doing what I want him to do. And the same thing with Katie Hopkins. I'll support her so long as she's doing what I want her to do. You could even go so far as to say someone like Tommy Robinson. I'll support him so long as he's doing what I want him to do. When he stops, I'll stop supporting him.
Yeah, so you've got a pragmatic view of things. No, I think
I just want Britain to win.
Yeah,
and the only way Britain can win is we must stop mass third world immigration. And if we don't do it, we will be destroyed.
Yeah,
that's my view.
Yeah, and I think that is a very sensible position to take in terms of being pragmatic. And you're right. I mean, like I say, I don't particularly like Katie Hopkins, but it's better that she's doing something rather than there being that position vacant. So I'll say that much. And I mean, and the same thing about Tommy Robinson. I mean, Tommy Robinson is not for mass immigration. I'm actually absolutely quite certain that he is not for. He is for stopping mass immigration. So he's used.
Sojourner, can I just interrupt you 1 second? I beg your pardon. I'm just noticing in the chat, Brittner Adam said, we're fucked just on birth rates with our immigration. And I do agree with what he's saying. But if we don't stop mass third world immigration, birth rates don't matter. We have to stop mass third world immigration. If we can do that, then we can argue and try to fiddle around with birth rates. But if we don't stop mass third world immigration, we are lost. UK is gone. 1,000 years of history up the jacksie.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, you just have to. I think the way I look at it is you have to look at each attack vector, as it were. So you've got birth rates from people who are born here, who have a passport, who you can't necessarily get rid of. If you want to try and get rid of them, then you have to repatriate them. Well, and then you've got migration, legal migration, illegal immigration. You have to tackle each of these attack vectors one by one. And some of them and some of them are more important than others. I mean, in many ways, as Adam says with the birth rates, if you don't do something about that, you're fucked either way. I mean, the fact of the matter is that each of these attack vectors have to be dealt with in their own individual way. And I suppose the way I look at it is that, which of these is actually the easiest to get an immediate result from? In terms of time expended, what's our best return on investment in terms of time out of these three particular points? Illegal immigration, legal immigration, and the birth rates. And I mean, I don't know what the answer to that question is, but it still stands to reason that all three of them have to be dealt with. Otherwise, the inevitable will happen, which I've already consoled myself to. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that something should be done to either slow it down to buy some time, or to just to fix it entirely.
I would say the first thing we have to do is to stop mass third world immigration. If we do that, we can then fiddle around with chucking people out of the country who commit serious crimes, chucking illegal immigrants out, and then we can look at maybe helping people by giving them money to repatriate to where they come from. But the first thing we have to do is to stop mass third world immigration. Nothing is more important than that.
Well, I mean, it's very interesting you say that, because in many ways, just thinking about this on the fly, I'm not sure that's actually the case. See, the real crux of the matter here is it's a question of citizenship, and the citizenship with regards to children being born in this country. So let me explain. So, for instance, you could have lots of migration come into this country, but if you deny those people the right to citizenship, if you deny their children that they have in this country, you deny them a right to citizenship. If you think about it, you can have as many migrants as you want, but if they're not citizens and they still retain a citizenship in another country, then you can get rid of them. So actually, when I think about this, migration coming into the country, so long as they don't have citizenship or residency, you can get rid of them. So actually, just thinking about this on the cuff, the main thing that we should be going for is the laws that govern nationality. Because if we can change the laws on nationality, and that means that children of migrants born here are not British citizens and they take on citizenship of their parents' country, then we could be in a minority, but if they're not citizens, we can easily get rid of them. So I think that's an interesting way to look at that, because the most important thing is that if you want to deport people, they can't really be citizens here and they have to be a citizen of somewhere else. Otherwise, you can't really get rid of them.
Well, look, I'm not going to disagree with you in saying that someone should be given permanent residency rather than citizenship. Citizenship should be something you don't get at least for 10 years. And if
no, they can never have citizenship. They can never have citizenship.
Well, yeah, okay, I'm not even against that. All I'm saying is that you don't get citizenship when you come into the country for 5 or 10 years. That should not happen. I totally agree with that. I'm not going to disagree with that at all. But I think we need to have maybe somebody else on the stream to give us a different idea if anyone wants to come on.
Well, I've thrown a link out, but nobody's nobody seems to have bitten.
Well, that's okay. That's okay.
But
I mean, I'm happy to offer.
yeah, it's just interesting to think about that citizenship thing, because that's in many ways that's something that you can. Again, I have a kind of Machiavellian way of looking at things, and there's no reason why you couldn't pass that law and make no fuss about it. You don't make a big hoo-ha about it.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like
I totally agree. I mean, someone could be here for 12 years and maybe then we give them citizenship, but it shouldn't be something.
you can't. Duke, we can't give anybody citizenship based on the birth rates.
I'm not sure about that, but yeah, okay, I see your point. I don't disagree with it. And at the moment, I think you get citizenship in the UK, what, 4, 5 years, maybe?
No. Well, my concern is that. Let's take scenario A. A guy migrates from India with his wife to the UK. They have a child in the UK. What I'm saying
Ralph.
is,
You mean Ralph, don't you?
well, I don't want to bring in. I don't want to get involved in any of this drama. So I'm going to.
Sorry, I'm only joking. I'm only joking.
I don't want to get involved in that stuff anymore. So that's my example. A guy migrates from India with his wife, has a child in the UK. The question is, or the way I'm looking at it is that if that child does not have citizenship, then they are still eligible to be repatriated back to India. So in many ways, if we had a situation where all of the migration we've had into the country and none of those migrants' children were actually eligible for citizenship along with them, we would actually not have any problem, because we could, if we wanted to, say, well, we're revoking your right to residency, we're revoking your visa, and you have to go. So actually, the linchpin of all of this is a question of citizenship. So it actually seems to me that the number one priority in an ideal world is changing the Nationality Act.
I agree with that, but I don't understand why we allow these guys into the country in the first place. Like, if you don't let them into the country in the first place, then any of this applies. Like,
but the fact of the matter is that has happened.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying exactly, and I think you're probably right. But I just don't understand, why do we allow, I don't know, 200,000 Pakistanis a year into UK? What does UK get from that, other than lots of raped school children?
Well, I mean, if you look at it from the economic point of view, every person that migrates to this country, every percentage point in growth in population is another consumer. And so, it is in big businesses' interest to have an expanding and growing market. So, as to why there is migration, I am not, there's no sort of confusion about that for me. There are natural forces at work that incentivize this kind of behavior, because it's very advantageous for big business.
But what does it do for average British people? It puts house prices up constantly, house prices and also rents. It puts the health service and the education service and all the rest of it under ever increasing pressure. And on top of that, it makes UK one of the most crowded countries in the world. Parts of UK are more crowded than parts of India.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you've just said there whatsoever.
It's just insane. And also, obviously, it puts constant downward pressure on wages.
Yeah.
And British people, including British Labour Party supporters, can't see this.
Well, the Labour narrative is that the health service is very dependent on foreign labour, and that is true. But the reason why that is true is because we have a state-controlled health service that has a very tight budget relative to other countries. And so there are natural forces at play, which mean that, what nurses and doctors get paid in this country relative to other countries is below the sort of first world rate. And one of the other things we have is that we don't have enough medical schools. So they're always talking about there being a lack of doctors, but what they never talk about is that for every placement at a medical school in the UK, they have 50 applicants or something like that. I mean, I read the numbers, I think maybe a couple of months ago, but they are massively oversubscribed. So if we wanted to domestically source more doctors, we should just simply be building more medical schools. But of course, again, it's just simple economics. If you can import really trained labor and not have to shell out for the capital costs of staffing and building a new medical institution, why bother? If you can get staff from Thailand and Philippines, and you don't have to pay for it, well then when you work that out in a spreadsheet, it's that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, okay. I saw something either yesterday.
Hang on a minute. Marco wants to come on, so I'm going to give him the link.
Yeah, let him on. I remember watching something yesterday or the day before, which said basically that the National Health Service replaced the British Empire, which I think is very largely true. The money that the Brits used to spend on the empire, we decided to spend on the health service. Not sure it was a good exchange, mind you.
Sorry, I'm just sorting out the links.
No, go for it, but.
Sorry, do you want to repeat what you just said?
I was saying that I read something yesterday or today, I can't remember what it was now, that the National Health Service was almost a direct exchange for the British Empire in terms of what the Brits spent money on.
You mentioned that on the Sunday stream, didn't you? I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure that was a really good swap, to be honest with you, for the average British person.
Well, I don't know about that. Labour did win a landslide election in 1946. Is it 46 or 45?
No, 40. It was 45. Yeah, it was 45. But they won a landslide election from soldiers who had often been away from home for 2 or 3 years. It's like these guys were not average British voters. Many of them had been away for a long time, and many of them had fought in a lot of battles that were not really winning, if you want to look at it that way.
Okay. Sorry, I'm dealing with some queries.
No, go for it. Look, I'm not a huge Winston Churchill fan. I know that when Brutus started all the 37 stuff.
Hang on. He said Marco's check in the green room. Marco's waiting.
Okay, well, let me see how I do that. Is that Zebedee?
Yeah.
There you go. He's added.
Hello, Zebedee. Hello, mate.
Good stream so far.
Cool. Glad you're enjoying it.
I was just saying. I would say that the British servicemen in the Second World War, and I'm not a huge Winston Churchill fan. Winston Churchill's military and naval strategy never rose much above crap. He was a troop commander in the British cavalry. He commanded like 30 British cavalry guys, and his strategy never got much above that. You look at Force Z in the Far East, which was the Prince of Wales and the Repulse, and many things in the First and Second World War. Dardanelles is another one. Churchill was an idiot in terms of British strategy. Mm-hmm. I didn't support Brutus because he liked Churchill. I supported Brutus because he was right that neo-Nazi bullshit will never win for British nationalists.
I think there's a lot of confusion about what our position on Churchill is.
100% agree.
It's not like we're some sort of fanboys of Churchill. The case was simply being made that you simply cannot you cannot have this sort of vitriolic view of the major leaders of our country and put that forth publicly and expect the public to agree with it. Whether we like it or not, Churchill in World War II is revered by the public.
100% agree.
That is essentially, in a nutshell, the point that we were making.
100% agree. The 37 words. I spoke to Morgoth on the Academic Agent stream yesterday and said, "Hello, sir, 37." And he said to me, when are we going to re-invade India? And I said, it's got nothing to do with that. It's an antidote to the 14, which is a terrorist load of crap.
Yeah, they deliberately just missed the point. They think we just want to reinstate the empire, conquer the worlds, even though that's not really possible today.
Yeah,
I'll make the British Empire as powerful as I can make it, and I'm extremely proud of the 14 overseas British territories we still have. But I ain't re-invading anyone.
We're more about uniting the Kanzok. That's what we mean by the empire. Because I guess it would be an empire if we had Kanzok.
Kanzok is excellent. That's Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Absolutely excellent. Closer trade ties, closer military and naval links. All excellent.
Yeah, but I mean, even when I look at those 37 words, and they're metaphorical to me. So when it says, we have a worldwide empire, well, in many ways we actually do. So it's not formalized, but our people, the people who came before us, they have been spread far and wide to New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and the United States, and our people. Our genetic lineage, lives on in those four corners of the world, and that's what I see.
And also South Africa, of course, where 40% of white people used to be English speaking.
Yep. So that's how I read. That's how I read. That we have an empire. That it's an empire that's bound up in the Anglo-Celtic diaspora. That's my reading of it. I never pretended that we have an empire. I never made any intimation that I wanted the empire to return. I saw those words as being a repudiation of the 14 and a statement of, I've had enough of your fucking anti-Anglo bullshit. I'm not going to take it anymore.
100% agree with you. Totally agree with you. That's why when I heard it from Brutus, I totally support it. 100% agree.
So it's not a case of taking those words literally. For me anyway. I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I took them metaphorically, and but mainly it's a repudiation of the 14. And like I say, I'm sick and tired of these American Euromutts telling us that we're the sole cause of all the ills in the world.
Yeah, the eternal Anglo and all that bollocks.
That's it. 100%,
the Anglos have been the most people who have kept it as it should be for the longest time.
Yeah, and again, I think it just it makes a mockery of this bullshit of no more brother wars, shared biospirit. When why is it that when I go and read comments in on videos that I'm seeing people who are they'll say in one instance they'll say, oh, you're stupid, the UK can't make it alone, and then in the next sentence in the very same comment they're saying, oh, I'm glad your country's being overrun by Muslims, you fucking deserve it. I'm sorry, where's the white well-being here? Where's the brotherhood?
They want us to bow down. They want us to bow down. That's it.
Yeah,
but we won't. We
won't bow down to anyone.
This is why they hate our our ethnic shield. Britain for the British race, because we won't back down. We always want to be on top. We don't want Germany dominating us.
I don't. I mean,
simple.
one of my great fears is that because of modernity, we're already being deracinated. No one really notices it, but our culture is basically being ripped from, being ripped apart through the cultural dominance of the United States. And, with things like with the European Union and Europeans, moving to different countries and air travel, it's so easy to just have all cultures just dissolve in modernity. And, I would very much like to keep, British culture alive and distinct from everyone else. So I don't want to see us amalgamated into this white, undifferentiated blob of whiteness.
But Brits have never been that. I mean, like Englishmen, they never hugged. They always shook hands. We were always very understated. I remember saying to you before this stream even started, one of the guys I like, who's one of our friends, is because he's very understated. And that's a British thing. Because Brits never had to say, oh, yeah, we're the greatest people in the world, because all Brits just knew that without even thinking about it.
Yeah,
and we don't teach that in schools anymore. So we have generations coming up who have no idea about British history and the great and wonderful things that so many British explorers and scientists and soldiers and admirals and all these people did. And ordinary Brits who backed all that stuff up. And if they hadn't have done, all of those top guys wouldn't have been able to do it. Because
I was just going to say, I mean, I've been reading stories in Australia about Australia Day, and you've got these white Australians saying that James Cook was an invader and what else do they call him? Basically an invader. And I mean, it's just how do you as an Australian living in Australia, how could you possibly support that position? I don't understand, because you wouldn't be there without that.
First of all, I'm not an Australian. I'm an Englishman.
Oh no, I'm not. Sorry, I don't mean you. I mean Australians.
Australians would call me a pom. But I have to say that the vast majority of Australians don't agree with that position at all, because without James Cook, there would be no Australia.
Yeah,
it was a wilderness when James Cook turned up, and it was Australians who turned it into this wonderful, the size of America country, but with only 22 million people in it, on the edges of the world, that is this great Western country. And that was Anglo Celtic people mostly. We took in Australia people from Europe after World War II, but basically it's a European thing, and it's mostly a British and Irish thing. That's why Australia is what it is. We made it.
Yeah.
And if you look at Aboriginal people in Australia, had it been left to them, it would still be like a wilderness and nothing, basically. Honestly, I'm not being. I mean, I've had Aboriginal friends. I had a skipper on an Australian boat who was half Aboriginal, and he was a great guy, and he learnt me more about seamanship than almost any other bloke I've known. And he was quite proud of being half Aboriginal, but he didn't pretend that Australia would have been some great place if it had just been Aboriginal, because it wouldn't.
Well, I mean, I actually personally don't like talking in those terms. I mean, my view is that if you've got a primitive people and they have a certain way of life, then fair play, let them continue as they do. So I'm, in many ways, I'm not really interested in lording it over them or trying to make them be more like us.
But it's not a matter of lording it over them. It's a matter of how do you create a civilization, and who has created civilizations? Well, not all that many people have. The Europeans did, based on the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, etc., and then Christianity. People like the Persians did back in the day. I suppose the Chinese did, but apart from that, not many people have.
Yeah, so I don't see why, from a British perspective, why should I be made to feel bad about those achievements, or the idea, the common narrative is that there's no glory in anything we ever did because there was always a Jew behind it, and the Big Bang starting point of history is 1945 or 1939, and that's it. And there's a whole plethora, plethora and wonderful history that we have, and it's just completely ignored because we have to talk about Jews. That's effectively the narrative of the British alt-right.
Well, okay, look, I don't think it's the British alt-right. I think it's the international alt-right, which is mainly the American alt-right. And again, I would say...
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Well, look, this is my view. It's the American alt-right for the most part. And I would suggest that people read or go and look at the website, The Affirmative Right, written by Colin Liddell, who is a Scotsman, who I think lives in Japan these days. And he was one of the original alt-right guys. And you can go and look at his stuff, published from 2010, 2011. The guy is not wrong. He's known most of the big-time alt-right guys, Spencer and all these people. And I think he has the right of it. And if you look at him, he has very little time for the likes of Colette, etc. And Colette makes most of his money from Americans, not from Brits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but this is a great example of the effects of modernity in the sense that you've got these new technologies that allow people across continents to connect with one another. They happen to speak the same language by process of economics. It makes sense to appeal to an American audience and talk about the things that they want to talk about because it equals more entry bucks and super chats.
Yep,
so,
absolutely.
Just an effect of modernity, but we don't have to accept that. We can fight that if we can recognize the effects that are coming out of these processes.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I'd like to hear what Zebedee has to say about this, but I would say that someone like Colette, if he isn't paid by the British government, is complete dimwit. My thinking is he's probably more likely paid by the British government, but that's just me. I could be wrong.
We all fence it on that, to be honest. Same with Spencer. Is he just moronic, or is he, just a plant, a fucking government plant? Because those two have the connections for dodgy people like Colette. As you know, Dr. David Duke, all that. So I think he's the perfect person to derail nationalist movement.
Well, there's a good thing on the Alternative Right website where Colin Liddell went on a Jewish guy's site. I can't remember what the guy's name is now. It begins with the American naval guy's name. Hang on, I'm going to find it. Where are we? There it is.
I just want to say one thing about Spencer is that there's one thing that I'm very thankful for that he did, which I will be eternally grateful for, and is that he blessed us with about 12 or 13 hours of content with Bowden. So I will always thank him for that. But the fact of the matter is that anything else that guy touches, he destroys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Jonathan Bowden. The thing I was talking about just now was go and look on the Affirmative Right website for Colin Liddell and Halsey English on the problem of the West. It's just under an hour, and it's a bloody good podcast. I don't agree with all of it, but I agree with probably about 78, 85% of it. But
So-
Bowden was a best thing on the right for many years.
So just coming back to Halsey English, I believe that he was part of the Blood Sports back in, what was it, 2017?
Yeah, briefly he was. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing that I can remember about that guy was basically one paragraph, and I'll paraphrase, but he basically said, the problem with the alt-right is that it's wrapped up with the Third Reich in the Jewish question, and that's all I remember about him. But I am in 100% agreement.
I'm less in favor of Halsey English than that. I think Halsey English is probably a bit more Zionist than that. But on the other hand, I'd agree with that about 75% for sure.
Okay.
I mean, and particularly in England. I mean, like in America, is there any truth in the whole JQ thing? Yes, there is. There is a lot of Jewish influence in Hollywood, in the media, in academia. There is, absolutely. Can't argue against that because it's true. There is a huge amount of Israeli influence on American foreign policy because of Zionists, but also because of a fair number of fundamentalist Christians in the in the USA as well. But does that apply to UK? Far, far less. Far, far less. I think it's vastly exaggerated in the UK by certain people who adopt the third position, which they pretend everyone doesn't think is a neo-Nazi thing.
Yeah, but the thing is that I mean, I won't deny that the ADL is a very powerful organization, and that AIPAC is a very powerful and influential organization. But in respect of AIPAC, I mean, that's a foreign policy matter. That's a foreign affairs matter. How does AIPAC relate to what the immigration status is in the US? What's the connection there?
Well, they don't. They don't.
Right.
But they leverage the Democratic Party in the US for sure. In the same way that people like Hope Not Hate leverage the Labour Party in the UK.
But the thing is that I mean, I always run a thought experiment, and I said this on the Unwashed stream when I was on there, and it's quite simple. So imagine one day that all Jewish people decide to pack their bags and go to Israel, and then fast forward 10 years' time. Fundamentally, what has changed in the UK? And when I run through that scenario, I don't really see a great deal changing.
No, I won't disagree with that. That's always been my argument, is that there is some truth in the JQ, but it's mostly true in the US. It's far less true in the UK. And people who make it front and center in the UK don't have the best interests of the British people at heart.
If the Jews did move, would that make much difference? Because technology,
Well,
you have to do a phone call. They're not exactly a physical dominant presence. So if Jews did move out of countries, I think they still pull the strings because the traitors, our own people are doing the dirty work.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think most of the traitors in inverted commas are Jewish. I think most of them are Christians or non-Jews, if you want. Listen, there are bad Jews. Yes, there are. But there are also a lot of bad Christians. There's a lot of bad atheists. There's just a lot of bad, bloody people. And many of the people who are destroying our societies are our own people. That's my view anyway.
Yeah, and that's always been my view, is that you can show me, you can give me anecdotal evidence of this Jew did that, or this Jew wrote this news article, and I'll go find 500 Gentiles doing exactly the same thing. So in my view, it's just a disproportionate focus of attention, and it's just, and it's also a toxic subject to talk about. So why? I just, I don't attribute the same weight of importance to it as other people do.
Well, look, I'll agree with Halsey, who is Jewish, on one thing. He says left-wing Jewish people are really bad. I'll agree with that. But then I think left-wing people of any religion or race are really bad.
Right.
So, I don't think it's specifically Jewish. I mean, apart from anything else, if you're going to adopt the alt-right neo-Nazi Mark Collett story, you have to believe in super Jews who are so powerful that all of us wonderful Western people are destroyed by the super Jews, which
demonic, aliens. That's what I hear. It's very,
it's pretty fucking crazy and makes us look pretty fucking weak. And I don't believe that.
Yeah,
yes, I mean, there are bad, but there are bad Jews. Sure, there are. But there
Duke.
Are bad people of all people.
Duke, we've only been the cradle of civilization, created all this wonderful art and fantastic engineering achievements in science, biotechnology, space travel, all this kind of stuff. But when it comes to setting laws, suddenly we're powerless to deal with this tiny group.
It's just because they are the super Jews.
We can't crack that nut, but apparently we can do everything else wonderful in the world.
Yeah, I don't get it. And how someone like Mike Collett can talk about how terrible the super Jews are in UK, but much less often talk about Muslim child rape gangs. I just don't get that.
Well, the thing I hate when they say that is, we got bigger fish to fry. It's like, you can't even kick a Jew out your own house, mate. And you're supposed to get them out of the country whilst Muslims are raping children. It's stupid. It's like
100.
We have to do this anti-jihad to gain momentum for that, kicking Jews out, whatever the end goal is for Collett. But no, he just bigger fish to fry. It's just stupid. I hate this kind of crap.
Zebedee, I've had this discussion with people a lot. And I'm an atheist, okay? I am a cultural Christian, 100%. But I'm an atheist because I just can't believe for myself. I don't think Christians are bad. And I do think that Christians could easily be right and I'm wrong. But on the other hand, I can get on with pagans like Survive the Jive, for example, who are nationalists. I can absolutely get on with Survive the Jive, no problem. I can get on with someone like the Distributist, who is a Roman Catholic, but a right-winger and absolutely agrees with most of what I say. I have no problem with anyone of any religion or faith, providing they're a nationalist. Now, I do have a problem with introducing different races into countries. That's a totally different story. And it destroys things. But I don't care if someone is a Christian or an atheist or a pagan. I don't really care if they're a Jew. I don't really care if they're a Church of England or what have you. I can get on with all of them, so long as they basically are nationalists who believe that nations should be a group of people. Yeah.
Like I said, I was raised in a non-religious home. In many ways, I kind of feel like I've been robbed by not having any faith, but that's the luck of the draw. That's where I am, and I have to deal with that. But in terms of like Christians and atheists, I don't see much of a problem. I do see a problem with Christians and pagans. That is a perennial battle that rages in these circles. And there's obviously a lot of bad blood there. But generally speaking, the pagan types are the type that are closely associated with the Third Reich kind of narrative, I think.
No, hang on, Sojourner. I'm not going to agree with that.
Okay.
If you look at someone like Survive the Jive, who is a nationalist British pagan, he doesn't believe in anything that you and I probably wouldn't believe in. I just don't see the problem with that. You could argue that you could have a Protestant versus Catholic divide in the UK, which was a fact for many years. But I think today we have bigger problems, frankly. And I think that nationalist, traditionalist, Catholics, Church of England guys, nonconformists, atheists, agnostics, and people like Survive the Drive, who is a nationalist pagan, could easily get on together. And Survive the Drive doesn't believe in any bullshit about doing nasty stuff to children or anything like that. If he did, I certainly wouldn't watch his programs. He doesn't. So I think we could actually get together and have much more in common than we have against each other.
Okay. Can you just check if there's anybody waiting in the green room? Because Ataman said that he would join us after dinner, and that was about 20 minutes ago.
Okay, so I've got Iron Duke, Sojourner, and Zebedee, who is on.
Okay, so no one else. Okay.
Yeah.
No
if
worries.
he wants to join, he's more than welcome.
Yeah, I'll just tell him to leave a message in a private chat if he joins.
So I don't think that there should be this big deal between Christians and pagans. I mean, most modern pagans are just people who look at what was going on in Anglo-Saxon England or in the Viking world.
I don't know.
I don't know, Duke. We've had, Marco, were you on the Brutus stream when the pagan guy came on and the fight that broke out between him and Niall? I mean, it is, I just see it in these circles all the time that you put a Christian and a pagan together and they're at each other like dogs.
I see it as racist atheism, man. That's all I see.
I don't know. Look, I don't know. I kind of read things like what's his name's Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, and
Gibbon.
I think that Gibbon, yes, and I think there's a certain amount of truth that Christianity buggered up the Roman Empire in some respects, but that's not directly related to us today. I think if a pagan believes in protecting children and not being an evil bastard to women and that kind of stuff, I think we can probably get along.
Pagans are small numbers, so I'm not really worried about them. I think.
Yeah,
they are. They're
not
nowhere near openly pagan in real life because, let's be honest, they get laughed at. And
well, the thing is that what does paganism even really mean in practice? I mean, there's no church, there's no defined ritual from what I can tell. So it's actually hard to really pin down what it means other than other than an ethical system. In which case, is it really even a religion?
I think it's an older religion. If you look at someone like Survive the Drive, and I'm sorry for going on about this particular guy, but he's an Englishman. He's obviously a nationalist Englishman. And if you look at his stuff, he's really trying to give us an idea of what Britons believed before Christianity. And it's not actually that terrible and has a lot of moral stuff that we would actually agree with.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of pre-Christian ethics, I mean, I'm very interested to explore that. So, I mean, like I say, I don't really have a dog in this fight because although I like to think of myself as being culturally Christian. I mean, I think that's completely fair to say, but I don't go to a place of worship or anything like that. But I've obviously been brought up in the residue of a Christian culture, so I don't have a sort of vitriolic hate towards it or anything like that. So in many ways, I feel like I'm quite well positioned to sit in between both sides of that debate.
Yeah, no, I feel exactly the same. I don't have a dog in it. I mean, as I say, I'm a cultural Christian, but I'm an atheist because I can't believe myself. But I'm not at all anti-Christian. And people who are Christians, I'm perfectly willing to say, okay, guys, you might be right and I could well be wrong.
But like
Phil?
nationalism without spirituality is completely fucking void, though. That's the thing, isn't it? It's like you need something. You need to bind the nation with something greater than just an economic. Like currently, our nation is merely, well, it's mainly just a. If you look at the state, it's there to sort of protect individuals from harm. That's it. There's no morality. There's no ethics. There's no the good. It's just that's
Yeah.
what's hollow about it.
You ain't wrong, mate. I see what you're saying. Exactly. Yeah, I do.
Whereas, like a nation binds people. This is the thing. It's like all individuals need an identity, and if you don't give them an identity, they'll either construct their own, or they'll form their own communities, or join other communities. Even if it's degenerate, it's better than not having anything. But if you look at a lot of people who are transgender, that's a good example. But there's a lot of people who are transgender because they've been isolated to a large degree. They're like men who've been isolated from society, and then they just turn into being trannies. You know what I mean? It's an identity better than nothing.
Yeah, because you're right. I mean, at the minute there is a complete void with regards to identity. Because I mean, in many ways, the only thing that we had left up until recently was nationality and community, and that's been torn down bit by bit. And so you think about, well, what is left after that? And it's basically just consumption and pleasure, and that can't be a solid foundation to build a society and a culture on.
I mean,
what is there to aim for above you?
Well, no. See, the thing is that Britain, if you look historically at how Britain was, I'd say before the 1800s, it had a strict ethical system, codified laws, and we lived in a patriarchal society that was built by great men that had obligations to the people of the nation to sort of guide them in the right direction of how they should live their life. And the problem with liberalism is that we got rid of that, and it's like I say, people are just attaching themselves to. They don't give a damn about their nation. Even a lot of nationalists that I talk to, they're more concerned with binge drinking and football and shit. And it's like a hollow version of identity. It's fucking shit. You know what I mean?
Phil, I'll agree with you 100% that many so-called nationalists don't give a shit about Britain, but they're not British nationalists. They're white nationalists or some other. I think there's a big difference between white nationalists and British nationalists. British people are white, absolutely, but we're not all white people. We're British. We're an Anglo-Celtic group of people.
It's something greater than just being white.
Absolutely.
It's more codified. It's like historically, if you looked at Europe, there was no such thing as white. There was an Englishman, a Frenchman, Welsh, Scottish, Italian, and they were united in the sense of Christianity. They were like a brotherhood of Christianity. That's what Europe was, really. That's what we talk about when we talk about Europe. It's not really white. They're white in that sense. That's what white meant. And I think
talking about Christendom, aren't you, Phil?
Yeah. See, here's the thing, right? When I look about PA, I think what PA are doing is because English identity has been deconstructed to the point where, like I said, it's just about preserving the individual. They're just creating their own identity. It's like there's no point trying to reconstruct English identity. We'll just go along with this identity because they haven't got an identity. If you look at a lot of people in PA as well, they're destroyed people that are flawed, very, very fucking flawed, and they need something. If English identity isn't there, they will just attach themselves to that because it's better than nothing. It's better than having no identity. And unfortunately, in English or British nationalism, nobody's gave them this British identity back. They haven't given them this rich history and culture and ethics. We've just
100%, Phil, 100%.
So that's interesting. So do you think that's why there's an attraction to, say, the Third Reich, because it's such a totalizing ideology? It's solid, Yeah.
It's like Islam. It's like a lot of people that they wonder why do a lot of white people or English people join Islam. Why do they convert to Islam? Because even though Islam, I don't agree with it, it's still a solid identity. It's still got a codified ethical system. It gives them direction in life, and it's well established. It's not as established philosophically as Christianity or Englishness, but it's still better than what this country gives them at the minute.
Yeah.
Our country doesn't give people an identity. It literally says, do whatever you feel like, provided you don't physically hurt someone. That's all we say to people. We say you are free to construct your identity and live your life however you feel like. And the problem is that in regards to the psychology of human beings, you are battling between your fucking lizard brain that's telling you to fuck, eat, fight, and you're fighting between your ego, and ultimately you necessarily need something greater to sort of balance that evilness that's inside of everyone. And if you don't give them anything, if you say you decide what's good for you, they'll attach themselves to binge drinking, Islam, white nationalism, like German nationalism, because it's better than what we can give them. Liberalism's not good enough. You can't just say construct your entire identity. It doesn't work that way.
You're not wrong, man. You're not wrong about that stuff. One of the big, huge faults of modern Britain is we give no identity to our children in England and Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. We give them no identity whatever, and you are 100% right about that.
In fact, our identity is you construct your own identity, and it's so flawed because, like, England, all nations of the world that have been successful have recognised that individuals left to their own devices will be destructive to themselves and destructive to everyone else. That's why we formed a state in the first place. We formed a state in the first place because we recognised state of nature is war, conflict, and this like brute barbarism. And for some reason, because of liberalism, we've let our guard down. And the thing is, when we let our guard down, there are people who will construct identities for them. Islam will do that. Islam loves that. They know damn well they can come to England and find all these alienated people.
Phil, let me try a test. I'd like to ask the other three people on this stream, if I said Agincourt, the bowel, what do you know about it?
I don't know enough about it.
Well, just what do you know about
it? Virtually nothing.
Okay. Other guys, do you know anything about it at all?
Did you say Agincourt?
Agincourt. The battle in the 100 Years' War with Henry V, the Shakespeare play, which should make it really pretty well known. Does anyone know anything about that? Did you get anything at school?
Not at all, no.
No, nothing at school, no.
So so if I said to you it was 5,000 odd English guys, about 3,000 of them English and Welsh longbowmen who were ordinary Brit guys, they weren't knights or men-at-arms, who had already captured a French town, but were then being chased by this vast French force, and eventually at Agincourt they were cornered, and they were facing almost 20,000 Frenchmen, most of them knights and men-at-arms, and the French thought they would just roll over them because there were so many of them, they were so well armoured. And they fought this battle in 1415. And the reason Shakespeare wrote a play about it was extraordinary. It was just over 5,000 Englishmen versus almost 20,000 Frenchmen, and the Englishmen won. And you guys don't know anything about it. How can kids go through school and not learn stuff like that?
No.
This is part of what makes you an Englishman and a Briton, is learning stuff like that.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, the thing is that, history is disprivileged so that we can learn quote unquote useful skills for being, useful in the work environment. It's all about economics, all about being workers. That's all it is.
So, I know you well enough to know that that's total bullshit. I know
No,
you're
no,
giving
that is
you're giving the opposite expression, but you know as well as I do, if Englishmen and British guys don't learn shit like that, how can you possibly have any pride in your people and think you're special? And you
I
have to
completely agree.
speak, and you have to think you're special to want to survive.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Most kids nowadays are Roblox citizens. They're not even English people. I know it's fucked up, but they are.
Yeah, I
Most
know what you mean,
modern day
Phil.
kids are Roblox citizens or Minecraft players. They
Yeah.
know more about Minecraft and Roblox than they know anything about religion or their nation or what it means to be an English person. It's fucking scary, man. They're
Phil,
Roblox citizens.
I remember years and years ago now, when I was maybe about 17, I was reading this book about history, and it was in the Anglo-Boer War, you know, when the Brits were fighting the Afrikaners in South Africa,
Oh yeah.
and the Brits were surrounded in this little tiny entrenchment, and a guy turned around and shouted out to the Boers shouted to the Brits to surrender. And one of the soldiers in the entrenchment shouted out, "I was a Durham miner and I've been in a bigger hole than this shit." And the Brits didn't surrender and held out. But we don't teach that to our children anymore.
Don't even teach them about like this. You know, we don't even teach them the mythology of England, like Beowulf. I always talk about Beowulf, but it's
Yep.
core to being English. That's the oldest English story we have.
Alfred the Great, the guy who actually defeated the Vikings, not once but repeatedly, so England became a nation.
Don't even learn that. Whereas Islam, if you talk to Muslims, they're taught everything about their identity. They know everything. In fact, there's a lot of Muslims who can even trace the ancestry of the Prophet Muhammad. They've got there's some Muslims who've got it on their wall. They know exactly that lineage. They know everything about their religion, their heritage, their people. They've got meaning and direction in their life. Whereas for English people, they know nothing about their history. They don't even know what it means to be English, and they're just told being English means don't hurt people, be a liberal. That's it. It's really funny.
I guess
All
it's a
right,
shame.
let me try.
I need to interrupt. Ataman's in the back room.
Okay, hang on. I've seen him. I'll let him in. Sorry.
God, none of us going to get a word in now.
Okay, let me just say one thing before I let our man speak. Does anyone understand why St. George is the patron saint of England? Anyone?
I didn't hear the question.
Does anyone understand why the St. George is the patron saint of England?
Oh, can you stop embarrassing us and just
slay the dragons and Greek?
I'll just tell you. Under Richard the Lionheart, who defeated Saladin many, many times because he was a really great general, people have told me, "Oh no, his knights were all Normans." Okay, some of his knights were Normans. The vast majority of the soldiers he took to the Holy Land were English, and when the English were being attacked by Saladin and the Mohammedans, they called on St. George for aid. And that was the first time and why St. George is the patron saint of England, because the English soldiers beat off Saladin and his Mohammedans. Anyway, Ataman, your turn, mate.
All right. I just heard you were talking about Alfred the Great. I thought it was quite funny, actually, because I was having an argument with someone on Facebook the other day, and he was saying about how we only learned the bad stuff, or the good stuff about the empire in school. And he was talking about tearing down certain statues. And I said, would you tear down the statue of Alfred the Great, since I think one of his orders excused slavery? And he was like, well, that's the point. We never got taught about Alfred the Great. I don't know who this guy is in school. And this was like a 30-year-old man. I thought, what a fucking embarrassment.
Alfred the Great, who created England, if anyone did.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that I think in many ways, when teaching history, that you actually have to teach more of it when you're sort of in your adolescence, because I think there is a risk that when teaching history, if you teach it at a very early age, that you may forget it. And so it kind of strikes me that if you're going to structure a curriculum, that you actually want to teach more of that as pupils are maturing, so that they're taking that on at the prime time. And of course, that's in competition with basically getting prepared to go into university and getting ready for the quote unquote real world. So it seems to me that we need to certainly bring back more history and sort of civics into schools and teach it later, so that people leave school remembering it.
I don't know, man. I like when I read history about English and British people doing absolutely extraordinary things that no one else has ever done, I'd never forget it. It sits in my brain.
Yeah, I kind of see that myself. I mean, as soon as you kind of get out of school and you start sort of reading history for yourself, you don't really sort of go back to much else. I mean, I pick historical stuff over fiction now, to be honest, more than anything.
Like you read about, I don't know, one of 100 English frigate actions against the French, where a small English frigate won. And you just think, well, that was because the British sailors were so much better. Yeah, the officers were probably better trained, but the British sailors were just braver and fired their guns more quickly. Or you read about Wellington pushing the French out of first of Portugal, then out of Spain, and then invading southern France. And the reason he was able to do that was the Royal Navy controlled the waters around the Spanish-Portuguese peninsula, but also because his soldiers were so damn well trained. And he had idiot officers. He often said he did. He had some not very good cavalry guys, but his infantry he totally relied on, because they were the British infantry who would stand there and never be defeated unless you actually killed them. And I just don't understand guys who have never learned this stuff.
Is there any other solution besides homeschooling to bring that sort of stuff back?
Well, yeah, okay, homeschooling is good, but I mean, you got to say that I suppose 99% of teachers are in the UK are big time lefties these days. You have to say that.
Would you say it's the information age as well? I'm guessing your day you didn't have internet and all that, so you kind of need to learn the history, but now you just need to Google it. You don't really need to know that, because you can just Google it.
Well, yeah, but you still need to know it. The thing is about all history and all learning to some degree is it's not a matter of where you get it from. It has to be in your head. If you understand it, then you know it. Like, for example, in the 100 Years' War, when the British were fighting the French in France in the medieval era, and we won the great victories at Crécy and Poitiers and Agincourt, an English bowman, an English longbowman, a war bowman, could go from being a war bowman to being a man-at-arms, and even, at least in 2 or 3 cases, to being a knight. It was possible just by being brave and good enough at his job. This was one of the extraordinary things about England. In France, that would have been absolutely impossible. He would have just been the wrong class. But in England, a guy who was really, really good and really, really brave and very lucky could actually advance to being a knight. That's extraordinary, and that is just English. No one else in Europe could that happen?
Do you think that fuels our love of meritocracy? Because we do seem to be particularly attached to it.
Well, I think it fuels our love for meritocracy for English people. See, I think there's a big difference about what you can. It's a bit like liberalism. Okay, this is something I didn't want to get into, but liberalism was a thing in the late 18th century, and it worked in the USA after the American War of Independence, and to some degree it worked in the UK, but it only worked for an Anglo-Celtic society. As soon as it wasn't an Anglo-Celtic society, that late 18th century liberalism never worked. And it certainly doesn't work today. And that's my deal, is I think, when Washington and all these guys in America were doing their stuff, and half the English guys were actually on the American side rather than on the English side. Yeah, sure, okay, I guess it worked to some degree then, but only for an Anglo-Celtic society. It doesn't work when you invite everybody from the whole wide world into your society, and it never can.
Yeah, but the problem with liberalism is that it's internally inconsistent. Like, I think the thing is that John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, when they're essentially like the fathers of liberalism, just forget about the French, they're irrelevant. But like, I don't think they really foresaw what the logical conclusion of liberalism would be, because they were from a different era. If you'd have told John Locke that liberalism would result in anime, furries, LGBT shit, mass immigration, and people having no sense of meaning in their life, I'm fairly confident he would have gone, yeah, maybe I'm wrong about this. You know what I mean? Maybe I think that's probably the case. But yeah, it was a mistake. Liberalism was a mistake, and that's what's got us into the mess, essentially. But the only thing you can do is...
So I was just going to say that isn't the point that, it's one thing to have an ideology, but you have to evolve that ideology for the times and for the technology. And I think much of what we're going through is, partly driven just simply by the processes of modernity and the technology that we're exposed to. So there's a duty on, philosophers to update. Well, there's a duty on philosophers and leaders to update the way a country's run, and you should roll with the punches and change as time goes along. But the problem is
with liberalism is that, like, if you study philosophy at university, they deliberately keep any opposition to liberalism away from you. Like, even when you study for a degree in philosophy, you only learn about liberalism, postmodernism, Marxism. You don't really learn about British idealism. And in fact, when you learn about analytical philosophy, which came from British idealism, they skip out British idealism on purpose. And then by the time you found British idealism, which results in ultra British nationalism, you're already a part of the liberal intelligentsia. So it's too fucking late. It's like, well, I'm a PhD in a liberal university and I'm learning about this British idealism. It's fucking way too late for me. You get what I mean? It's almost as if it's deliberately kept away from you so that you can't change the system. It's fucked up, man. But that's what they do. It's done on purpose, intentionally.
Yeah.
I totally agree with what Phil just said. But could I ask guys now, how do you feel, or what do you feel the 37 words is about? And why is it important for British people?
Was that to me?
Who's going first?
Well, I'll go first, just so I can shut up. But I think the 37 words is important because it's talking about the identity that we lost, like Englishness, which is superior to whiteness. It's about restoring like a moral order, like a moral, spiritual Englishness order into society, rather than this bullshit white nationalism or whatever kind of crap ideology. That's all I'm going to say, pretty much. I'm not going to go up too autistic, because it'll take forever. That's
Good
fine.
on you, man.
Yeah, I just have to echo what Phil said because I mean we discussed this earlier on, Duke, but I pretty much feel the same way. And like I said, it's a repudiation of the 14 words because it's there's this process of just amalgamating all white people into this blob, and we're not just a blob. We are different ethnicities, and we've got our own identities, and we need to protect them. And you know, part of this thing for me in general was to just you know, like Bowden said, to read about your own history as a revolutionary act. And in this day and age, you know, we're not exposed to enough of it. So that's always been part of my personal journey to get more in touch with the past, because if you don't know the past, then you don't really know who you are, do you? As simple as.
English and British are the best.
Yeah. It's a great stepping stone for civ nuts as well, I would say. Instead of it's like weird, spurgy and that sort of crap. That's for instance, like that Chris PT Talk guy came with Tommy guy, and now he went full on Colette. That he didn't. There's no transition at all, and I think the 37 is a good transitional kind of stuff. Proper British stepping stone, I guess.
Yeah, you haven't got to kind of climb this mountain of the JQ and stuff like that.
No,
You just go straight to the Irish question, the only real question.
the real question. The greatest question never answered.
There are many, many good Irish people.
Yeah.
My mum was Irish, so there you go.
Actually, I want to say something about the Irish question. So for me, I mean, I know that Marco had been sort of going on about this as well, but I've always noticed it. But the reason why I started bringing it up was because it was kind of a meme, and I thought to myself, well, if people can pick out like individual Jews who are doing bad stuff and call it the JQ, well, I'm going to do the same thing with the Irish to sort of like make a mockery of it. That was kind of always my point about it. That you know, you can always find people who do bad shit, but you know, that basically sums up my position on the Irish question.
There are many good Irish people. My ma was born in Ireland, in Tipperary, as in the song, but her dad was a Welsh ex-RAF guy from World War II. And if you ask me, and my dad was an Englishman with a few Scots bits in him, and if you ask me, I'm an Englishman, and I'll be an Englishman until the last time I draw breath.
I'm going to have to go in a minute because I've been on for 2 hours. So actually, I'm probably going to drop off now. So Duke, thanks for having me on. It's been really good. And I'm sure we'll chat again.
You're more than welcome, mate.
Okay, cheers, mate. Bye, guys.
Okay, is anyone else got anything they want to bring up?
Not really. I think we covered the Colette question a while back.
This is not about Colette. I don't... Look, Colette is an idiot, basically. He's either an idiot or he's paid by the British government, but he's one or the other. So this ain't about Colette. But if you've got something you think we should talk about, now's your chance.
I can't think of any, really. I mean, I don't think you want to go deep into the Irish question, to be honest. But,
there is no Irish question. There are good Irish people and bad Irish people, just like there are good English and bad English people. You know, some of us are Marxists and some of us aren't.
I think, to be honest,
I did 2 tours in Northern Ireland with the British Army, and the Provisional IRA and Sinn Féin were Marxists. And what we're seeing now is that Sinn Féin in the Republic of Ireland are totally and completely pro-mass third world immigration into Ireland. And Ireland's disadvantage compared to Britain is it has a very small population, and it won't take many years for Irish people to be replaced.
When we say the IQ, I think we mean the Irish immigrants, especially in Scotland, because half of Scotland's Irish, and they all vote SNP. And I don't think Scotland should want independence. You know,
I lived in Scotland for a while, and most Scottish people, in my opinion, are good guys. And
Yeah.
I would remind you that the last time there was a referendum on Scotland leaving the UK, most Scots rejected it.
We can debate that if you want. I mean, the Celtic versus Ranger thing. That's the Irish
Yeah,
versus Scottish
and
kind of beef. And that's-
Celtic was Irish, and Rangers were the Protestants. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I lived up there, like I said. But like I say, last time there was a referendum for the SNP, most Scots rejected it because most Scots aren't bloody stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see other examples as well, like Scousers. I mean, there's quite a few good Scousers in this movement, but you know, they'll have mottos like "We're Scouse, not English," and a lot of that seems to come from the fact that they have a huge Irish population up there, and they sort of don't really identify with the wider British society.
Yeah, absolutely. Most Scousers in Liverpool, Irish, not English. But there are many good Scousers who have changed over time. I lived in a part of London which had many Irish people in it, and most of them you wouldn't know they were Irish at all, apart from the fact they went to a Roman Catholic church. But yeah, absolutely.
Punk Bastardo's asking you, do you think there's a political solution?
Well, this was the original idea of this stream, is I think we might maybe, and I say maybe, be able to get behind someone like Farage if he actually finally comes out and says, okay, we need to stop mass immigration, which is what he's messing around with at the moment, but not quite brave enough to do.
Yeah. Well, national populism is what we need. I don't like this revolutionary kind of spirit amongst the right. We need political evolution, not revolution, because they're not edgy. They're not, we're not so in discomfort where we need a revolution. We're comfortable. Revolution has to come from discomfort, not, oh, we foresee this future. We're in decline, but we're not in the shit yet. So,
do you really think we're comfortable? I think
we're comfortable. We've got takeaways. We've got
most
white flighting.
Most British people are not comfortable.
When I say, well, we got the basic, necessities, don't we? Not exactly.
Yeah, we have those, but I don't think most British people are comfortable. I think most British people are not uncomfortable.
Yeah, not enough to revolt.
Well, yeah, okay. UK is the least likely place to revolt in the whole universe. I think if we had someone like Farage who said, okay, we need to stop mass immigration in the way he used to say we need to leave the EU, I think a huge number of Brits would support him. And they would be right to support him in that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing is that the whole satisfied thing is people will lie to themselves and they'll keep it relative to their current standing. So I can't remember who it was by. It was another YouTuber, but there was an essay, and he basically brought up some stats, and he showed that suicide amongst the under 30s is double what it was 120 years ago. But people say they're just as happy as they would have back then. So people lie to themselves. Essentially, they have that sort of cognitive dissonance where they sort of apologize for their current bad situations.
Yeah,
and they will look at the fact that they've got iPhones and widescreen TVs, and they'll say, yeah, this ain't bad. I think the house market will probably cause a ruckus, if anything. But
well, look, I tell you, I live in Australia, okay, and where I live, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of late 19th century workers' cottages, which are little detached houses small but detached, and with a back garden which would, on UK standards, be fairly big, often these days covered by a new room. And these were workers' cottages for unskilled workers, basically. One guy working, wife staying at home, 3, 4, 5 kids. You know that story? And today, a working class guy or an unskilled working class guy, even if his wife is working, could not afford to buy one. They're $500,000, approaching $1 million each. And the schools keep kids until 6 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock in the evening, because the wives are all working. And that's just, it's the destruction of everything which is good.
Mm.
You know, do you want to pay $500,000, $750,000 for a working class house, but your kid has to stay in school until 6 o'clock at night because your missus is working? It's like it's just the destruction of everything which is good.
Yeah, but we've got a sort of media complex now that tells people that this is as good as it's ever been, and all that came before was a lie. And
I don't know.
to an extent, people believe it. I think a lot of people don't.
Do you think you're happier than your parents?
Oh no, absolutely not.
Because I certainly am not, and I think most of us, if we were really honest, we're not happier than their parents, and we're not happier than their grandparents, even though our grandparents often fought in World War II.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was having this conversation actually with my grandmother the other day. We were talking about front gardens versus back gardens. And she was saying that like people would sit out in the front garden as opposed to the back garden, and you'd talk to people that go by. And I was like, well, why don't you do that anymore? And it kind of struck her, and she's like, well, because I don't know anyone in the area, and it's not particularly nice to sit out there because you just don't know anyone around you. And I thought, well, there you go.
100% true. 100% true. That's my view about the world. We are not going forwards, we're going backwards. And we're especially going backwards from the point of view of Anglo-Celtic society. We're just destroying ourselves.
Angelus is waiting to come on. He's in
Hang
the
on.
background.
Sorry, mate, I didn't see him. He's on.
All right.
Hello. All right, lads.
How you going, mate?
Not too bad. Thank you very much. Just back from the pub.
Nice. But yeah, it's like, but the thing is with that is that we will laugh at, let's say, something like Nation of Immigrants. We laugh that off. We think that's an absolute joke, but there are people that believe that.
Yeah, but
In the
how
same way
do
that
they?
there are people-
How do they believe Ataman? How do they believe that? It's utter nonsense.
Yeah, I know.
There was hardly any non-white people in the UK in 1950.
But for a lot of people, I think believing a lie is easier than facing up to just how damaged the society is and how much needs to be fixed.
But we're British. We're British, and we're better than that. British and English people are better than that, and we can look at our history and say, no, that's bullshit.
Do you think this is the American influence? Because that's a very American argument, nation of...
I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps. But I think British people have got to start looking at our own history and saying, that's crap. It's not true.
We're more of a nation of conquerors than anything. Been conquered so much.
That's the argument they use on us, isn't it? Though they say, "Oh, you did it to us, now you get it back." But it isn't them who's doing it; it's our government who's putting it onto us.
Well, you say that, but you know what the Brits did was we populated countries like Canada and Australia and New Zealand and America where there weren't many people. We didn't do that to places where there were lots of people. We ran them for a while, but we didn't give them loads of British immigrants. We actually gave them very few immigrants. In India, for example, it was really hard for a British guy to go and live in India. Unless you worked for the government or the military, you couldn't go live there.
Yeah, but then you're not going to outbreed the Indians, are you?
But we weren't trying to. That's the point I'm trying to make. You couldn't go there as an Indian, as a guy. If you're an average bloke in UK in, say, 1880, you couldn't just go to India. You had to have all sorts of ways to go there. And unless you were within the army or the civil service, you couldn't go there. There was no loads of Brits who moved to India. The only people who did were working for the civil service or the military.
But you have to look at it from their perspective. That's not how they think, is it? They think you ruined our nation, you ruined our home or whatever.
Why are they still using our railways and roads and dams and all the other infrastructure that the British used if we ruined their nation?
Well,
yeah,
the Africans destroyed everything, and they still use the same argument.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But it's not. They don't argue from an objective perspective. They argue from an emotional type of argument. So you're not going to win the round.
So they're mere women who don't care about facts and just care about how they feel. In India today, in 2020, most of their railways were built by the British. So were many of their roads, many of their dams, and much other infrastructure. And it's ridiculous to pretend that's not true.
No, it is true. It definitely is. But they think they'll never admit that, because their mentality is we conquered them and nothing after that. Whatever you do, it doesn't matter.
They say, well, it's true, but it's for your benefit, not our benefit. That's the.
So we did conquer them. Why did we conquer them? I mean, like, was it a fair fight?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so we conquered them. We built all this shit, which benefited them, not us. And now they're going to slag us off.
I don't think. Well, I mean, I do think they're correct in how they think. From their, we did conquer them, and we did kill a lot of them, and now they think they're doing it back to us. But it's not them who's leading the charge of that. It's our own people, our government, who's doing that.
But they killed quite a lot of us too.
Yeah, but come on.
Have you ever read? No, hang on. Have you ever read about the Battle of Versailles that the Duke of Wellington had?
No.
He was outnumbered by an enemy that had many more guns than he did, and he won purely because of the guts of his British soldiers, some of whom were Scottish. He won just because of the guts of his soldiers. Had nothing to do with anything else. When the British fought the Sikhs in the First and Second Anglo-Sikh War, the Sikh army was European trained. It was trained by French, Italian, and American officers. It had more artillery and heavier artillery than the British did. And when the British fought them, quite often the sepoy, the Indian regiments of the British Army, held back, so that in a brigade of 2 sepoy and 1 British regiment, only the British regiment would go forward over the entrenchment, because the Indian regiments would hold back because they were scared. And the Brits still won. Do you think we did that just because we were average guys? Or do you reckon maybe, just maybe, the Brits were really, really extraordinary and the bravest of the brave?
the secondary one. But the
That's
thing
what
is,
that's what I think.
the thing is, though, is I agree with what you're saying. You know, we definitely, they deserve to get what they got. They deserve to get conquered. But I was just saying, like, the mentality that they have is that they're just doing to us what we did to them. Never mind reality, in that we did actually benefit them more than we even benefited ourselves in giving to India what they got. But it's just, you know, think about how they're thinking.
Okay, so even if you do that, do you think the Indian Army would have any chance whatever of beating the British Army now in 2020?
I mean, you know, it depends a
With
lot.
our allies,
I mean,
yeah.
assuming they got past the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force, do you think the Indian Army could actually invade UK? Because honestly, I'm really doubting that myself. I'm reckoning they'd get the shit kicked out of them. And I'm not the biggest fan of the modern British Army.
They will never invade us, but I think they, you know, could keep their own. I don't think we could invade them. It's probably a standstill.
Maybe because of numbers, but like, apart from that, they'd have no chance of invading us. My point is that you can turn around and say, "Oh, we did this, this, and this," but they can't return it to us because they don't have the strength to do it. It's not possible. Like, India can't invade Britain. The Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force
I mean, to a
would
degree,
kill their invasion forces long before they got anywhere.
To a degree, I think they have. I mean, look at how many Hindu governmental people we have right
Absolutely, but that is because the British government has allowed them to do that.
now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with India's strength. It's got to do with British and Conservative Party weakness.
Yeah, you know, the Indians are actually brown Jews. I don't know if anyone knows that, but that is.
I'm not getting into that shit, mate. But I will tell you, the truth of it is that everything the Indians have done to Britain, and it ain't so much the Indians, it's more Pakistanis and Bangladeshis who are Muslims, but everything they've done is not because of how powerful they are, it's how weak the British government, the Labour Party, and also the Conservative Party have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with the Tories is that people kind of expect this shit from Labour, but they kind of expect better from the Tories because the Tories know what's up and they just ignore it. So it kind of cuts quite deep because it's like treachery.
Totally agree. That's why my original idea for this was the only way that British nationalism can win politically is with somebody like Nigel Farage, who can force the Conservatives to adopt a basically non-mass third world immigration policy.
Yeah. Do you think there's much hope in someone like Farage with his this Reform Party who wants to do?
Well, I don't see anyone else, frankly. Apart from him, I don't see anyone else. I mean, Johnson is obviously a joke now. That's plainly obvious to everybody. The Labour Party would be even worse. So what have you got left? I mean, okay, Anne-Marie Waters might be all right. I don't know. But she's never going to win an election. She might get one or two MPs if we're lucky. My real hatred of someone like Mark Collett is, apart from the fact he doesn't like British people, he thinks Germany is wonderful. My real dislike of him is that all of those good, patriotic, good Brits are being led up the garden path by him, when the only people who might do something for us is someone like Farage. And I don't think Farage will solve the problem, but he might, maybe, if we're lucky, slow it down for 10 years.
I mean, Steve Bannon still seems to have hope in Dominic Cummings, who, of course,
Yeah,
only comes as a package deal with.
I'm very dubious about Cummins. Cummins, for example, doesn't like the British aircraft carriers. And I'm a bit biased about that because my boy is Royal Navy. But those British aircraft carriers give the British government more oomph around the world than they've had at any time since 1978, which is a good thing to have because it means you can control things more. But like I say, I'm not a huge supporter of Farage, but he might maybe be able to at least get us on somewhere that gives us some chance.
He's a start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He might be able to start us on the right track.
I would wish Peter Hitchens got into politics. I really do. I think he'd be a good man.
He's just so black-pilled.
Yeah, definitely. It's just Farage that people talk about Batten and Brain. They have no charisma. They don't have anything new. I know Batten talks about great gangs.
I actually like Batten. I wish Batten had got more support. But someone like Farage with Batten as a deputy might be the best that we can hope for at the moment. That would be actually immensely cool compared to what we have now.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the thing is, Farage seems to have built up so much momentum. He can just go anywhere and start anything, and he gets a huge base of support wherever he goes.
Well, Farage is more intelligent than Trump, for sure. I mean, I'm not a huge Trump supporter. He didn't do most of the things he said he would. On the other hand, I hope he wins the next election for the USA's sake. But having said that, I think Farage is a lot more intelligent than Trump. And he would probably do a bit better for us than Trump did for the Americans.
If Trump does win, we're going to need Farage to do something because obviously those two are connected, and hopefully they can start like cultural revolution, whatever evolution. You know what I mean? National populism.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I just worry that most British people, we don't know our own history. We don't even know who we are. You know, a lot of young people in the UK don't know anything post 1939 or something. And most British history, which is way over 1,000 years, was way before that. You know, we were being a share of nearly everybody long before they even get taught anything in UK education. And if they don't know that, how can you can't defend yourself if you don't know you're great to begin with?
Yeah, but I'm still not sure how quite we can do that, to be honest. How we can sort of imbue a new generation with a better understanding of the history. I mean, that sort of requires a bit of a slow march through the institutions, doesn't it? Sort of one of our own.
I'm not sure it does. I like things like the academic agent deciding he's going to do online streams for people. And okay, I think mostly they're going to be economics, but you could do that for history. I'm trying to do my little bit in the Discord for our little 37 group on British history that I hope younger guys will have a look at. I think we can get there, but we have to look at other ways of telling our people what we really are.
Yeah.
You know, when Townsend XXXV11 turns around and says, Battle of Trafalgar, 4,400 French killed, 450 UK killed, I'd like to be able to put something on the end of that and say, well, that's how that happened. Because you can.
Yeah.
Godzone is talking about putting history into video games, which that's actually happening. I see a lot in this circle. People are playing your Hearts of Iron. I know that's 1930 stuff, but like Europa Universal, back to like 1500s and all that. I think that'd be a great way to teach the kids history. I guess is put it in their games.
Well, I'll tell you, I would look at people like Alexander Clark, who does naval history on YouTube, who is a British naval historian, and will tell you everything you ever wanted to know about the Royal Navy and how bloody brilliant they were, from admirals to ordinary seamen. I'd look at people like Drachnafel, who looks also at naval history and not so much at the British, but also at the British. You can look and find what you're looking for. There are good channels on the British Army. There are good channels on Wellington. There are good channels on 19th century campaigns. And that's just on YouTube, As soon as you start going on books, as my old man told me when I was about 8 or 9, anything you want to find about anything, there are books about it. And I think
people aren't reading nowadays, though.
Well, they're not, but they should.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember reading books when I was 9, 10 years old about the British Army in the Crimea, when the British were fighting the Russians, and just being absolutely gobsmacked about what these British soldiers did to the Russians. Just extraordinary. They were just so brilliant. And I don't think people know most of that shit.
No, I don't think you can go back to that either. We've got video games, videos. Tell kids to read books now is near impossible.
Yeah, I think you kind of need to get it into the pop culture, to be honest.
No. Come on. Intelligent white men need to read books.
But you need to
read
get it into
books.
the music to tell them to read books.
Yeah, okay, maybe. But I don't know, man. Like I said, my dad told me I couldn't read at all until I was about 7. And my primary school teacher in inner London told my dad he'll never be a good reader. So my dad used to sit me on his lap every night with a Janet and John book and make me read it. And when I didn't do things right, I sometimes used to get a slap. But by the time I was 8.5, I could read. And then I started reading ancient Roman history and British history and all sorts of shit. You can do it. It's not difficult, and it's actually quite exciting and interesting, especially if you don't know it. Some of the Brits have done more extraordinary things than any other nation that's ever been, by a long way. There's hardly anyone we haven't beaten, and the ones we haven't beaten are the ones who never fought us.
Yeah. But you just got to try and get that message out there, especially to young men.
Trying to. Anyway, guys, I think we've probably beaten this to shit, and I'm going to get too pissed if I carry on much longer. So, very, very kind of you guys to come on. And I am going to try and do a stream every Saturday because I'm told that's the best day to do one. So I wish you all well. And 37.
37?